Hello, everyone.
Hello.
What day is today, Nick?
Tuesday.
No, it's America Day.
America Day.
It's 4th of July,
4th of July, baby.
which is also other days depending on what country you're in.
Yeah.
I think it's the emancipation of Poland from authoritarian rule or
Really?
something. Something like that.
So that's why you brought your automatic rifle with you today, with the extended barrel clip and grenade launcher.
It says the one looking like a redneck from Duck Hunt with the cap and the hair. All right. What are we reading today?
What a coincidence. We're reading an American author on July the 4th. Wow. This is
No, but she's like a
quite
subversive
surprised.
leftist, so it doesn't count.
Ursula K. Le Guin. The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas is a very short story.
Very short.
It's literally like 13 pages long. You can read it in like 20 minutes.
Mm.
Why have we read such a short story? Well, I had an exam, very important exam on Sunday. Phil's been very busy applying for master's programs. So, yeah, we're kind of taking it, a little bit easy. I mean, this is like literally probably the shortest thing we could have chosen.
It is. Next week we're bringing you, or next fortnight we're bringing you, The Road to Serfdom by Friedrich Hayek. So stay tuned for that.
Phil gets his libertarian.
Well, no, Hayek isn't even that far out there. So
Okay.
We'll get to the big stuff eventually.
I've been preparing my arguments.
I'm putting you slowly in the bathtub. Those in first, so. Okay.
So yeah, this again, it's a very short story. It was published in 1973, and Ursula K. Le Guin, I think, was active from like the 60s, mainly in like the 70s, I think. And she is kind of interesting, I think, because she does a lot of like speculative science fiction, and it's all quite like clearly inspired or influenced by like the Soviet Union and America, and just like political philosophy. I really like thinking about different political solutions, and she's like quite involved in that.
To just throw some keywords out there for this particular story: utopianism, anarchism, science fiction, utilitarianism, and sacrifice.
Individualism as well, I think, is a part of it. So, what happens
in the story?
What's Omelas?
Omelas is a fictional town, city, place where we are dropped in at the time of a summer festival to kind of symbolize the height of joyful celebration and merriness.
Activity. Everyone's, there's everyone's running around celebrating music.
This place is awesome.
It's kind of shown as this beautiful citadel kind of city. There's horses. There's all these kids everywhere having fun. And
people are happy. That's the thing about Omelas.
Yes, and also, as well as being happy, there's a very rich like intellectual culture. There's very rich culture, full stop. And it also makes the point of like saying that there's no there are no kings, there's no kind of like evident like tyrannical hierarchy or like unexplained.
There seems to be no
hierarchy.
particular structure of government.
Yeah.
And we can get into the details of the society, but to just summarize quickly. So, first half we start out by getting a description of this place, and then in the second half we are introduced to a little twist, which is there's a basement somewhere in this place where there's a terrible, what is the word used? Imbecilic. Rotten, downtrodden, syphilitic child sitting in its own excrement
in a windowless room.
And this child's suffering is what the whole happiness of the society is based on.
Yeah.
And so everyone knows it's there, and people just accept it, and they know they can't help this child. It just has to suffer in that basement. And everyone gets along with their day, except for some people who are the title of the story, the ones who walk away from Omelas.
Yes.
And they just walk out, They don't rebel, they don't revolutionize, they just leave Omelas.
Yeah.
Once they know this terrible truth, and they never come back.
And so, this story is not like a narrative. It's not. There are no characters. There's no plot. All it describes is like this image of this city. The people that walk away from Omelas, they're not characters. The narrator is just describing that there are people that, upon learning this, decide that they leave.
It's not really long enough to establish characters.
No.
Yeah, and the child in the basement is 10 years old. And, there's obviously some imagery there with the sacrificial nature of children and their innocence.
Mm.
And yeah, I guess we're going to spend a lot of time debating about what this child really signifies. Obviously, we can just ask him directly. I mean, he's here on the podcast. Nick, how did you get out of this basement? Like, with all the feces and such, like...
How did I give it away?
Why'd they lick you out?
Shut up. So, firstly, I just want to, I don't know, I think for, even though it's a very short story, the imagery is really, vivid. It's very, very, beautifully written. And this, contrast between this, this sunny citadel on the top and this, absolute, how do we say, completely off the radar, essentially CIA black site level, terrible place where this one child is just by itself basically all the time. I really liked it actually. I thought it was very interesting and quite unique. It's good for having a discussion about these kind of topics, right?
I really didn't like it at first, and then it got really interesting in the second half. So I'm ambivalent about it, but okay. I think I liked it.
Good, cool. You must like it.
Said the child.
You're fucking coming at me today. So, where should we start?
Some repressed anger.
So, one of the clear entry points to talking about this is utilitarianism, right? So, this it's a part of political philosophy. It's a way of making decisions, and what I guess popularized by Jeremy Bentham, and then later talked on by a bunch of other people. And the fundamental idea is the happiness is morally good, and the best course of action is maximizing happiness for the largest number of people. So when it comes to making a decision, you want to have the biggest possible benefit.
Right, but so pure utilitarianism would absolutely incorporate the subjugation of the few,
yes,
for the benefit of the many, which is where we get a kind of departure from that with John Stuart Mill, who says, no, but there's also natural rights so that you can actually, take everything from someone and give it to everyone else. And
If pure utilitarianism is you could justify slavery, for example, or subjugation of any people, tyranny, and rule that utilitarian is a bit more like you said, you can have baseline rules that people generally regard as good. This is this world that these people exist in is this pure what is it? Is it action utilitarianism? What was it called? Act utilitarianism, right?
Also, I just want to say, sorry, finish your point.
I was going to say, so everyone in this city, whilst they're aware of the fact that this child is being, kept in these absolute deplorable conditions, they look at the abundance that they live in, and they look at the the fruit of their culture and how happy their lives are, and they think, they kind of try and justify it to themselves through that.
And also abundance, not to be picky, but abundance is maybe not exactly the right word.
Okay, yeah, sure enough.
It is like explicitly stated that the unnecessary like luxury goods would not exist in this society. Like no necessarily washing machines or like, you know, kind of the consumer goods from the 60s onwards, right?
Yeah, fair point.
It's like buy more stuff. So there's like a little bit of anti-consumerism baked into this, though it's not obnoxiously loud. Yeah. No, I was just gonna say I didn't look anything up about the author, but like they were two specific points in the story where I was like, okay, this has to be written by a leftist.
Oh yeah, she's pretty.
And then when I looked it up, there all the keywords: California, Berkeley, cultural anthropology, feminism, gender ideology, all came up. But what do you think were the what do you think were the 2 points that like where I was like, okay, this has to be written by a leftist?
I have no idea.
The first one was that the happiness in this society is not gained by the pursuit of some meaningful goal, but by sex and drugs and that kind of dancing.
Oh, right.
And the second point is that when it talks
it was saying that it wasn't saying that is the only,
not the only, but it's like a significant portion of.
Like, it was saying that like certain pleasures are good, and it was imagining a world where like doing these things comes with like no negative consequences, right?
But it does spend like just percentage wise of the story, like we don't really get a description of where the happiness comes from,
right? But
it does talk about that quite a bit. And well, the second thing that was like really the nail in the coffin for me was when it talks about soldiers. Where is it? It basically says like this would be a world without soldiers. Let me look up the actual passage. Can you like control F on that thing you have for soldiers?
Let's talk about the religion as well.
Can you read the little passage about soldiers?
Yes, if this stops being annoying.
Nick is figuring things out on his.
It says, "As we did without clergy, let us do without soldiers. The joy built upon successful slaughter is not the right kind of joy. It will not do. It's fearful and it is trivial. A boundless and generous contentment, a magnanimous triumph felt not against some outer entity, but in communion with the finest and fairest in the souls of all men everywhere and the splendour of the world's summer." Something like that.
Now, obviously, you know me. You know, I'm not a pacifist, but you know, I'm not an aggressor. I don't believe in attacking other countries or warfare or anything like that. But there's always this imbecile notion that leftists have about the military, which is it's like just men going to war and bashing heads. Like there's no idea that maybe defense is necessary to defend against attackers, and that obviously if such a utopian society exists, you would immediately get fucking other people from outside attacking the society, right?
I don't know. I guess I get your point, but like I don't think that's like a universal leftist position at all. Like if you look at like Scandinavia is like a perfect example of like a very, very like huge social welfare and like big social democracy, but still has a very strong emphasis on military and even like conscription and stuff, right?
Yeah,
and that is explained.
But they also have very low corporate tax and very racial homogeneity, and there's lots of racism in Scandinavia. So, like compared to other places.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't know if we can just say Scandinavia is leftist.
Oh, I mean, well, it definitely by some metrics but
not by others. Like,
I mean,
we can, that's a debate for another day. But I don't know. There's always these debates with like some red pill guy and some like feminist woman, and they're always like, what about the right to vote? Why did men get it earlier? And eventually the guy says, oh, it's because the right to vote came with military conscription and there's a responsibility, and women didn't get drafted, so they didn't get the responsibility with the right. And at some point the woman will say, but that's a privilege, like that men got to get to war because the women were underestimated. Like that's a privilege that they got to die in the trenches. Like maybe women wanted to go to war, they just couldn't. And it's the same notion that I feel like is kind of embedded in that statement in this text, which is like, no soldiers. Oh, the joy of warfare is bad, and all those men bashing heads. We shouldn't get joy from that. We should get joy from all the drugs and such.
I don't know if I get your point, but yeah. But I mean, regardless, the big point here is that this is not like this is not a world that's necessarily being advocated for. Like regardless,
yes,
right?
Which is why the story redeemed itself in the second part.
Right. My point is that like surely you correctly identified this as written by a left-wing person, but it's actually a bit more like nuanced than that. It's not. This isn't just an advocation of like some perfect society.
Sure, but this was like a dead giveaway, though. I was like, there's literally no way it's not written by left. But anyway,
so I think this is an important point though, because I read, I didn't finish it, but I read some of one of her other books, The Dispossessed, which builds this similar like contrast between these two different worlds. One which is like this like communist realist like situation, and another which I guess is more like laissez-faire like capitalist country or like world, and it's about these like ground level interactions between a scholar from one of these planets, like going to the other place and like noting how things are so different. And I think one of the things that like I kind of read in this as well is like she's kind of like found a way of sort of like
mitigating the two.
Yeah, like trying like using them to look at each other, or like finding ways of like assessing and criticizing and like thinking about different like different political like ways of organizing people.
Then the third big thing also was like the children are communally owned by the society. Parents don't get to raise their child. The community owns the child.
Right. Yeah.
It's just like, okay.
But I mean, then it's like own. Actually, and there is private ownership in Omelas. There's a lot of public stuff as well, but it kind of sort of like crosses the lines between this like strange kind of ambivalent, like there is private space but there's a public space, but it has this kind of like pre-industrial village kind of like culture, I guess, like where child is raised by the village, summer solstice connection with like nature and stuff like that, and it's not non-industrial as well.
Well, so the thing is, in the second part, we obviously get this dark secret, which kind of spoils the whole utopia. But still, in the first half, I think she's like trying to build this place up as like a really nice place.
Yeah.
So I can't really put my finger on whether we're supposed to take away that all the things that are mentioned in the first half are interpreted to be like great, or whether she is like putting all these things out there and then at the end subverting it and saying, yeah, but it doesn't work.
I'm not sure if she's necessarily saying that it doesn't work, but I do think that it's probably fair to say that the world that she's writing about, she's probably expecting that a lot of the people who are reading it are like on board with that, or at least see some kind of value in that, like that world that she's imagining. And actually, there's points where the narrator they're describing the world, but then it's kind of like implied that the narrator is just like making it up as they go along. Because there are points where it's like
there shall be this, and
and also like just imagine they asks the reader to imagine like the best city they could imagine, essentially.
If you like the previous proposition, we should also add on this.
yeah. So I think that probably has to do with.
I like that. That's quite nice. Yeah, she does that well.
But yeah, so I guess we could talk about the child. This is.
You wanna already go to the child?
We can. I guess we can talk more about the world.
I feel like we can dig into a lot here.
Mm.
So the first thing that kind of really jumped out at me is, on the point of, okay, so yeah, there's no king and so on. Okay, it says they also got away. Sorry, as they did without monarchy and slavery, so they also got on without the stock exchange, the advertisement, the secret police, and the bomb. Yet I repeat that these were not simple folk, not dulcet shepherds, noble savages, bland utopians. They were not less complex than us. Okay, so we have 4 things: the stock exchange, advertisement, the secret police, the bomb. I don't know, it's interesting that these are the things that are listed, right? She's making the point of a society with few rules that is simple, that is almost anarchic in nature, but still, she says they were not bland utopians, right? So it's not we should all go back to the farms and the fields and make our own shoes and that kind of shit, right?
Right.
Like there's something more, like, okay, the stock exchange and advertisement. So clearly this is like a jab at consumer society.
Yes, yeah.
And
money as well.
Yes, and if I wanted to be annoying, I would like list all the merits of the stock exchange now, but we're going to do without that.
It's also kind of irrelevant, right?
Yeah. But then we have the secret police and the bomb, which are more like totalitarian.
Yeah, violent.
Rather on the opposite side of that. So we have both the rejection of the power of capital and the power of the state.
Right, yeah.
So whenever there's like discussions about anarchism and about freedom and what liberty really means, we always hit a kind of bedrock of definitions at some point whenever I talk to any Marxist. So it always comes down to what does freedom mean? Freedom from what? And the Marxist notion is always, freedom from power. So is the right-wing anarchist notion. And then it comes down to how do you define power? And the Marxists would say, power is, the employer has power over the employed. If you have more money, if you have more things, if you have more material goods, you have power over someone else. And the only thing to rectify that power is to have the state intervene and equalize the playing field. Whereas the other side,
like a proletarian revolution, right? Like a
yeah, but that would have to be the state
to prevent private companies from forming. Sure.
So you have to. The Marxist notion would be that you have to have compelled force to equalize the power of capital, whereas the libertarian notion would be that you have to have, empower freedom of the market and the unequalness of capital and wealth, which is, just as resources are scarce in nature and men are not created equal with their abilities and so on. And that the real power that is to be objected is compelled force. You don't have to call it the state. We can call it compelled force.
Okay.
So the Marxist notion is overcome the power of capital by compelled force. The libertarian notion is overcome the power of compelled force by capital.
Right, yeah.
In this listing of 4 things, we have the negation of both. Right? Stock market, advertisement, that's capital, and secret police and the bomb. That's compelled force.
You're smart. Nice. And I mean that also I think speaks to this as fantasy, right? Like this is utopia, right?
And for all the leftist thing, it's kind of post-ideological, really.
This world.
Yeah.
Right.
I would say.
Yeah.
So yeah, I forgot what it's called, but there is like a notion it's called republicanism, and it's different, obviously, from the American Republican Party.
Okay.
But yeah, this idea that freedom both from the power of capital and from the power of the state. So from all kinds of power. There is a notion like that called republicanism that you can find out there somewhere.
Right.
I forgot who originated it. It exists apparently. Or so my teacher told me.
I just thought republicanism was just
there's a couple.
Yeah.
Well, in the political sense, republicanism would be the organization of smaller communities,
right,
as opposed to a federal government, right?
Right, exactly.
So it's kind of like Taylor. What is it? Taylorism. What is it? Mark Taylor, something Taylor.
I have no idea.
It's a rural community ideology where it's like, yeah, kind of like anarcho-syndicalism, where you have like small communities with their own rules, and
Yeah, I was thinking about anarcho-syndicalism when you mentioned that. Yeah, like self-managed small communities.
But I think really what the point that she's making here is that the community is not really managed in any sense.
Right.
I mean, it just works.
Yeah, sure.
It's not managed by capital. It's not managed by the state or compelled force.
Yeah. It is a very weird world to just imagine. And obviously, it's a very short story, and it probably benefits from that, to be honest. Like, I think it would be much more difficult to draw this out into something longer, especially because, like, halfway through, the narrator basically is just like, just imagine it. Just, like, imagine this thing.
Imagine there's no heaven.
But, again, I think this is part of it, right? Like, it's supposed to be...
Yeah.
It's supposed to be... I mean, like, when he talked about the orgies, right? The what does it say here? It talks about things as not habit-forming. So, what does it say here? For those who like it, the faint, insistent sweetness of Druze, is, we assume, is the name of a drug.
Some made-up drug, yeah.
May perfume the ways of the city. Druze, which first brings a great lightness and brilliance to the mind and limbs, and then after some hours a dreamy languor, and wonderful visions that last of the very arcane and inmost secrets of the universe, as well as exciting the pleasures of sex beyond all belief. And it is not habit-forming. So, and it was very, very explicit, right?
Yeah, and it also says later that the citizens are so happy they wouldn't really need Druze anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah.
So it's like saying, going for a couple of drinks with some pals is fine, but no one's going to get addicted.
Exactly. So it connects with this, like, communist idea, right? And left anarchist idea that when you, if you remove the financial incentive, if you remove like capitalist incentive, then then all of these ills will vanish, and people will no longer, have addiction, and people will no longer treat each other poorly and stuff like that.
Right. Well, it's making like the whole. It's not habit forming thing. That's really like a biological statement, though. Right? Like. Sure.
But I don't know. I think it's kind of suggesting that like you can have your cake and eat it. In this
definitely.
Place, right?
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Well, then like it says to the passage I was reading earlier. It tells us the people are not simple. They're not less complex than us. And then it says. The trouble is that we have a bad habit encouraged by pedants, and sophisticates. Apparently, I'm not one of them.
Pedants and sophisticates.
Pedants. That's how you call it.
Do you want me to read it?
I googled pedants, by the way, and it said it's like people who overcomplicate things.
People who are pedantic, yeah.
Pedantic.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's why I got not a great score in the jury. But yeah, and I thought immediately of some faculty at our university. Considering happiness is something rather stupid. Only pain is intellectual, only evil interesting. This is the treason of the artist, a refusal to admit the banality of evil and the terrible boredom of pain. So yeah, this idea, it got me thinking, but I didn't really get anywhere. But it did hit something deep within me. It was like, yes, we do kind of intellectualize pain and like, I don't know, like there's a kind of romanticism in tragedy. Um, it's not really the underground man thing in Dostoevsky, but there's like a, I don't know, there is definitely a tendency in humans to take pain and tragedy and suffering and kind of revel in it, and like contemplate it more than is really useful in a utilitarian sense.
Yeah.
Like it's also tied to self-pity, which is not explicitly stated here, but it's like when we think of like I don't know, the French Revolution, you probably think of that like one painting where there's like a guy holding the flag on like a mountain of corpses. I don't know who painted that.
Right.
But that is kind of that, right?
Sure. Yeah, and so I mean, it's good that you bring up Dostoevsky because this apparently, this is not an original idea, and Le Guin has like was actually inspired by maybe not inspired by Dostoevsky. Actually, she says that she wasn't actually. Although she's read a lot of Dostoevsky, she wasn't actually. She gave credit to someone else, a guy called William James. But Brothers Karamazov apparently, like one of the one key part of that story is this same kind of like scapegoat situation. This question of like, can you justify, something positive if it comes off the back of something so terrible? But yeah, I also found it kind of difficult to pass this sentence as well, because it's like kind of undermines Omelas as this utopia when people are, kind of. It says here, we have almost lost hold. We can no longer describe happy man, nor make any celebration of joy. Which kind of, I don't know, it doesn't really like fit with the other things, like talking about pleasure, culture, and like these like great ceremony and stuff like that.
Well, I think it's saying like, it emphasizes this part that they're not simple people. So it's not like the utopia where, like, if we just all have UBI, we start painting Mozart and eating grapes.
Right, yeah.
But, these people, they also think about things in a deeper sense, and there's more deeper intellectual pleasures. But there's also the whole partying and that aspect, and they can have that cake and eat it too.
Yes, yeah.
But, they're not just simple, like, I watch my anime and get my welfare check and I'm happy people.
Yeah. It's not, it's like hedonism is part of it, but it's not all of it.
It's not the point of it, yeah.
Which is actually quite an interesting distinction. It's like, you can have the extreme hedonism of your fucking druids and your orgies, but you also have like a sensitive idea towards like pain and death.
And she extends an olive branch by like saying there can be religion but not clergy.
Right.
Which obviously I think, except for people who are working in organized religion, everyone kind of dislikes organized religion. But not the idea of religion itself, right?
Religiosity.
So there can be higher goals, there can be spirituality, there can be these kind of things.
Yeah.
And apparently this lady was very involved with Taoism and all that.
Yeah,
which,
you can like, kind of imagine that.
Yeah. As I kind of rolled my eyes when I saw it, I was like, oh, of course. Smoking those blunts.
I mean, hell yeah, brother.
No, it's cool.
You sound like a nog for a minute. No, it's actually super dope. It's dope. Super dope, bro.
Smoking all those pots, all of them. What was it? Where was I going with this? Right, but she wasn't just like saying religion is stupid.
Yeah,
like a real leftist would have.
Maybe some. She it's I don't know. I think it feels like pretty reasonable.
Yeah, she's very reasonable in this.
So, what else?
Right, anything before the child?
What else do we have here?
Okay, before we have the sad child, we have the happy child with the wooden flute.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
What is this one about?
Little kid. playing on a wooden flute. People pause to listen and they smile, but they do not speak to him, for he never ceases playing and never sees them. His dark eyes, wholly wrapped in the sweet thing magic of the tune. What the hell?
It's hard. It's hard to read this. I swear, I don't like her sentence composition.
No, I think this is just digitalization. He finishes and slowly lowers his hands, holding the wooden flute. As if that little private silence were all the signal, all at once trumpet sounds from the pavilion start, and near the starting line, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I think I thought this was significant when I was like listening, when I was reading it, but
I totally read over it.
It felt like it was like a little scene that was going to become something more.
Well, we have the whole thing. It says child's 9 or 10.
Yes, yeah.
And then the child in the basement is also 9 or 10. So I have this like, one child can be happy because one child has to be sad.
But it doesn't feel like this child is actually particularly happy. Like, his dark eyes wholly wrapped in the sweet thing, magic of the tune. It doesn't feel like the child doesn't have any happy expression, right? And if anything, it sounds like
it's in a trance.
It's contrasted against the people who are laughing and smiling around them. Maybe one thing that we learn later on is that children are exposed to this basement child early on.
You can say me.
They're exposed. They're shown the child like at some point in their lives. I think they said about 10. I think maybe 10 or 12.
Yeah.
So maybe this kid has like seen the kid. I don't know. So now I think we should move on to this description of the child.
Maybe read that.
I don't want to read all of it because it's pretty horrible.
Well, they could have gone harder on this. Like, I
found it really, because I think that the way the way that it set it up was just like made it much more like kind of gruesome, which is unpleasant. I don't know.
I just read like a history of the Soviet Union, so I was like, wow, this child is living the dream. Like, it's got like food and shit. Holy fuck!
It's got half a bowl of corn.
It's not even being raped constantly. Like, wow.
So, what's the question? So, what happens? We have this image of this child playing the flute, and then the scene kind of moves on. And the last sentences are: the festival of summer has begun. Do you believe? Do you accept the festival, the city, the joy? No? Then let me describe one more thing. In a basement under one of the beautiful public buildings of Omelas, or perhaps in the cellar of one of its spacious private homes, there is a room. It has one locked door and no window. A little light seeps in dustily between cracks in the boards, second-hand from a cobwebbed window somewhere across the cellar. In one corner of the little room, a couple of mops with stiff, clotted, foul-smelling heads stand near a rusty bucket. The floor is dirt, a little damp to the touch, as cellar dirt usually is. The room is about 3 paces long and 2 wide, a mere broom closet or disused tool room. In the room, a child is sitting. It could be a boy or a girl. It looks about 6, but is actually nearly 10. It is feeble-minded. Perhaps it was born defective, or perhaps it has become imbecile. Through fear, malnutrition, and neglect. It picks its nose and occasionally fumbles vaguely with its toes or its genitals as it sits hunched in the corner farthest from the bucket and the 2 mops. So on, so on. So, we know this child is locked in this dark room all the time. It's practically like wild because we assume that it's like lived in these conditions for all its life. Has like a pot belly, has a sores all over its body, doesn't even speak, and this is the other side of the world.
Nice autobiography.
So then we learn that this is not a secret either. So
this is what makes it so much worse, right?
Yeah, it is, right? Because it it's not, the terror of learning that you live in. It's not like the terror of learning like how the petrol that fuels your car is produced, or how like your fucking iPhone is made. It's like something that is everyone is they're actually culturally introduced to it. It's like as part of their culture. Like the people are brought to this room to be shown this child, and so it says they all know it is there. All the people of Omelas. Some of them have come to see it. Others are content merely to know it is there. They all know it has to be there. Some of them understand why, and some do not. But they all understand that their happiness, the beauty of their city, the tenderness of their friendships, the health of their children, the wisdom of their scholars, the skill of their makers, even the abundance of their harvest and the kindly weathers of their skies depend wholly on this child's abominable misery. It goes on to say that kids between 8 and 12 are normally shown, and it's explained that this child is here. There's when we talk about like terrible injustices in the world, some of them are things that people try to avoid. People tend to try and avoid speaking about these things, or rather, people they tend not to I guess really think about these kinds of certain kinds of injustices. Like if we talk about production of iPhones, for example, people don't really. Me too as well. Don't really engage with what kind of practices come behind that, and what kind of problems there are with so many forms of production and stuff like that. And not even to do with production, but necessarily, but as far as we're talking about benefits that we procure from as a society.
Well, here's
the difference here is we're not talking about consumption. This is just a fact of this whole society.
Yeah.
And it acknowledges as well that if this child was freed, within a day, Omelas would be no more. It would just completely collapse.
Right, and obviously here it's obviously there's no actual mechanism tying the suffering of this child to the happiness of the society.
Yeah.
You just kind of have to swallow that.
There's no reform, right? Which I think is probably a significant thing to say.
No reform?
There's no system by which to improve, if you know what I mean.
Well, right, but there's also no system, we just have to accept that the suffering of this child is what makes the society possible, but it's not explained why or how.
Right? Yeah, but this is my point. The liberal reformist attitude would be there are problems and there are injustices, but these are systems to which we can improve. And in this case, it's very, very silent on the matter of why this is actually connected. And I think it's probably for that reason, because this is supposed to be a philosophical question, really, right?
Well, and here's this is kind of one of those hurdles where I get the kind of statement that it's making, that the sacrifice of some is beneficial for the many, and that comes with moral dilemma and so on. But we can define happiness in many different ways, and maybe there's probably some way in which we can think of. Let's try to think of an example where that kind of exploitation actually works. But economically speaking, the idea that exploitation is actually more beneficial to the society than non-exploitation, that is more productive, that it provides more utility, that's just so not reflective of the economic literature. Slavery is not productive. Slaves are not more productive than paid workers. They're simply not.
Yeah.
And revising a lot of colonial history, it's that's why in many places why people were poor, because the basis of work was slavery and not like incentivized labor. And like I can't think of any. Well, then it depends also how you define exploitation. So one way would to say, if two mutually consenting parties enter into a contract thinking that they're better off as a result, but one person has more money than the other when they enter the contract, therefore it's exploitation. Well, like with that definition, we just cannot not have a rational conversation. That's the Marxist notion. Like I get the system of thought that it's in, but at that point, like we just have to like throw in the towel and be like, well, like, fuck, I'll just go fuck myself then.
I don't know. I mean, like,
and sorry, just to finish that, and the other way of exploitation would be to say that like compelled force is used to exploit someone, like actually being physically locked in a basement or being physically forced to labor, right? And that definition I can work with.
Yeah, of exploitation. Okay.
Like if we bring the whole group power dynamics into this, then there's no end to it. Then it's group identity. Okay, all women are oppressed by men because patriarchy. If you're poor, then somewhere else, then you're oppressed because they have more money, and then it just never ends. You know, it's just not a workable ideology.
Maybe, I don't know. But anyway, where?
Oh right. I was trying to make the point that I cannot actually. I do not swallow the pill that exploitation or oppressing of the few actually benefits the many. It does not benefit the many.
Oppressing the few benefits the many.
This does not happen in the real world. I cannot think of an example. Maybe we can come up with one. At least economically, it does not work. Maybe we can find other measurements of benefit. Like you could say, if I don't know, if we think of like a really, really, really racist society, and you can say the blue people are happy when all the yellow people are dead, so they kill all the yellow people. Okay, now we can conceive of this notion, but like in a utilitarian economic sense, I think the idea that like the oppression of the few is utility for the many actually does not hold up economically.
Yeah, I mean, but then, you know, we're also not really talking about like economics when we're talking about this place, right? Like it's not... then no one is extracting anything from this child, right?
Exactly. That's the kind of like...
So...
Well, I was like trying to grasp, and you mentioned the whole iPhone thing, where I would rebuke you a lot, actually, but...
Okay.
Like, I just could not conceive of this scenario where the benefit of the many could actually be justified based on the suffering of the few.
Yeah, I mean, but then, I mean, if we talk about slavery, for example, like you could say that it's not the optimal way of giving benefit to people, but you could still say that it like slavery could produce things that would benefit people, right?
Now you can make an argument, and this would be the same as kings, or communist dictators or whatever. Is there can be scenarios where the benefit of the few, and I mean like the very, very few.
The benefit of the few.
The benefit of the few can be justified on the suffering of the many.
But I'm talking about the opposite of that. Right?
Yeah, and I think the opposite of that, it cannot be true.
But it surely can if we're talking about slavery, right?
I don't think so, because at the end of the day, you would have to have a large stock amount of slaves to support the benefit of the few, whatever, farmers, producers, so on. But if they just employed the slaves as employees.
But I'm not talking about comparison between... I'm not talking about which would be the most effective. All I'm saying is... What was your main point?
Well, the point is that if the child was free, the whole society would crumble.
Yes. Okay.
I think the scenario where the few are oppressed to support the benefit of the many. It just there's really no example of that in the real world. There are examples where the benefit of the few is based on the suffering of the many.
But isn't it kind of like difficult to say like in this scenario the whole thing is dependent on one child, like everything is dependent on one child. But that doesn't mean that you can't gain from exploiting people, even a small number of people. You can derive like a an amount of you can derive benefit from like anything, right? From just exploiting any one person or
Well,
anything.
okay.
Like,
Let me try to
which could
state.
provide like a whole like social wide benefit, right?
Let me state this as a system of equations.
Okay, great.
X is the oppressor. Oh no, let's make this easier. O is the oppressor, and
You
O is the
fuck- you're like,
oppressed.
I don't want to put.
P. Okay. P and V. Perpetrator and victim.
Okay.
Okay. P is the oppressor. The perpetrator. V is the victim. Okay.
Yeah.
So P can get benefit from exploiting V,
Mm-hmm.
but if P is larger than V, this equation will be false. Whereas if P is smaller than V, this equation can be true.
But if me and my girlfriend, we have like a little goat slave or something, I don't know, that washes the dishes for us, like we've got some benefit, right? It might be distributed between two people, but
But the administrative cost of making that goat a slave instead of a happy employee.
that's not my point. My point isn't that one is better than the other. My point is that one would still derive benefit. You'd still derive benefit from that system. And by the way, I am not advocating for slavery at all.
Nick has been taking the pro-slavery position for 20 minutes.
No, I'm
You got the duck hunt hat on.
slavery is obviously like inadmissible. All I'm saying is your
No,
point.
okay, but I think benefit. You can't just have benefit in a vacuum. It's always compared to something.
Mm.
Like that's like saying, I don't know. Like, I got my wages cut by 50%, but I'm still getting 50% of my wages, so I'm benefiting. It's like, yeah, but not compared to the alternative reality, right? Like, there's no counterfactual.
Maybe, I don't know. But then, I mean,
Whereas
what if-
in this story, there is a counterfactual, right? It's like the child is oppressed, the child is not oppressed. Child is oppressed, everyone's happy. Child is not oppressed, everything goes to shit.
I don't know. I still think. No, I'm not.
I still think some people.
Anyway, we're kind of getting off topic, so we should jump back in.
Oh, don't make me sing a blues song.
So, yeah.
I was just saying that that was like a kind of hard pill for me to swallow. Where I was like, I get what she's trying to say, but she's losing me a bit, like with the analogy at this point.
Okay.
Like can we actually come up with a scenario where like, and it doesn't have to be one child, but where a minority where the oppression of a minority is not simply beneficial, but it's the make or break point for the benefit of society. Like if the minority is not oppressed,
Sure.
society cannot function. Like you cannot come up with this example is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I think that.
Like, sorry.
No, I'd probably agree.
And then it's like depends how we define benefit, right? Again, economically, definitely not. Maybe in some kind of religious terms, you could make this argument. But then you have to go like super, super racist or oppressive, where you say like,
yeah,
a certain group of people is so unclean that they cannot be in the society.
Well, I mean, maybe one example, maybe you could, like when you talk about like ethnostates, like the ethnostate is contingent on obviously having little to no like other races in this place, right?
Well, I don't know what's the definition of an ethnostate, like a super homogenous society.
Super like racially homogenous society, yeah. I mean, like basically Japan, right?
Okay. Well, okay. So the thing is, if you swallow that preposition, that axiom, basically, that some people are so impure they should not, like they jeopardize the society, then this concept can work. But realistically, it's just not true, right?
Yeah, no, of course.
You would have to swallow this kind of religious axiom in order for this concept to even function.
Yeah, religious versus cultural axiom.
Well, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess that could be one example of maybe we could kind of think of that. You could kind of imagine that, but yeah, again, the technicality of this, like the system of this, is so vague that I think it's kind of meant to be like that, right?
Right. It's kind of it's the king in yellow. It's the thing that we can't explain because it doesn't actually function, but we're going to entertain it for the sake of the story.
Yeah, right? yeah, fair enough. So, what are you thinking about the people in Omelas now?
Right. So all the next questions. So what about the people who leave, and what about the people who don't?
Yeah.
And which one is right and which one is wrong, and is that even a reasonable distinction to make? And what is the darkness that the ones who leave, go into? Well, would you stay?
Well, okay. I think there is a what's the word?
No, you wouldn't, because you're in the basement. Go.
A false dichotomy. So we're talking about the ones who walk away from Omelas, the ones who leave. There's nothing about the ones who try to destroy Omelas, right?
Yeah, that's what my first idea was like. But why is no one trying to save the child, right? Like,
and it's not because people are like fucking Brave New World so mud up, like they don't even think about the fact that this suffering is happening, or the fact that this world is unequal. But it's because they know that, right? And there are people that justify it, and there are people that just like don't think about it. I don't know, but I think I've got very strong Nietzsche vibes here. Firstly, we have an individual leaving. They're going to the fucking mountains. They're going to the mountains, people. So I just peeked the mic. Mountains, obviously, key imagery in Las Spoke Zarathustra. And they're all walking in their own. They're all walking by themselves, right?
Yeah.
This kind of like, there's no organized effort to leave. There's no organized effort to change or do anything. No one's like, we should form some kind of group to oppose what's happening here. There's no one fucking picket sign holding outside the basement. There's no one trying to rescue the child.
Well, there's also no government really, so who are you going to demonstrate against, right?
I mean, broader society.
The society, right? But then again, like, who are you really addressing except yourself?
I mean, you would be addressing anyone that...
Because you could just let the child out. No one's really keeping it, like...
I mean, but maybe they are, like... it says the door is locked, right?
Right.
So someone has locked it. And, even if there is no authority that holds the key, let's say that it's, freely handed to anyone, or to anyone, to anyone, then it suggests that that everyone agrees with the fact that the child should be in there. So if you went against that, then someone would try and stop you.
And on that, I think actually maybe the most horrible passage is where it says that even if the child got out, it wouldn't even appreciate freedom. It's been in there so long that it wouldn't
know real joy.
Wouldn't know what to do or what the fuck the sunlight is and shit like that. And that's like...
But it's also described as... That's kind of described as a justification that they give themselves.
And that's why it's so horrible, right? Because in this, the narrator is being so evil in saying this.
Yeah.
It's like this... It's this super...
It's really
elitist,
cynical.
like...
Yeah.
Pearl before swine, like...
Yes, yeah.
Even if the laboring poor are so stupid, even if they, they couldn't even read a book if we gave them a book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which is like...
It's so horrible
which
to
is
say.
The pro-slavery argument.
Exactly,
right?
exactly, yeah.
So I'll read the passage because actually it's quite nice. It says, often
You would
it's
like
not...
that.
So,
yeah, Nick, tell me why the pro-slavery passage is quite nice.
oh my god, this is so bad. I'm done. I'm cooked. So this is after we're told that the children are being, taken to the child to see, and it says the terms are strict and absolute. There may not even be a kind word spoken to the child. Often the young people go home in tears or in a tearless rage when they have seen the child and faced this terrible paradox. They may brood over it for weeks or years, but as time goes on, they begin to realize that even if the child could be released, it would not get much good of its freedom. A little vague pleasure of warmth and food, no real doubt, but little more. It is too degraded and imbecile to know any real joy. It's been afraid too long to ever be free of fear. Its habits are too uncouth for it to respond to humane treatment. Indeed, after so long it would probably be wretched without walls about it to protect it, and darkness for its eyes, and its own excrement to sit in. This is what I would describe as bad.
Redeeming yourself?
So the fact that the narrator says, as time goes on, they begin to realize that blah 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 blah. Like this struck me as like this like parental authority. This really fucking annoying thing was like that I told you so.
When you were older, you will appreciate what I've done for you.
Yeah, or some of that, but like more what the thing is more like if you make the mistake. Sorry, Mum, I think you're probably listening. This is not a dig at you. This is just the general idea.
Yeah. So the child sitting in the next room.
Yeah. I forgive you for leaving me in a dark room, Mum. No, so, but the assumption that it takes time for you to realize that this thing is bad, or it takes time for you to grow up and realize this thing is good. It's like, when you're gonna get a real job? Like, my mom's never said that to me, but like, that kind of thing. Like, the fact, the assumption from adults that there is a correct way of doing things, and obviously children, like young people, one of the great functions and great things about young people is they try to do things differently, and that fails. It does definitely fail, but it doesn't invalidate the whole project, right? And in this way as well, it's like these kids come to realize, as they should realize, because this is the only way.
Right.
This is how it goes. They come to realize that this child should stay in this box.
So they're angry at the injustice at first, and they cry, but then they get over it.
Yeah,
because it just has to be this way.
Yeah. And then all the justifications follow that the child is happy in its misery, or is more content in its misery than it would be without, which actually completely invalidates the paradox, right?
Right, and there's another essential point is that the Omelas is defined as having no guilt. So as soon as the people start feeling guilt, they have to leave. They leave, right?
Right.
It's like by definition, the ones who feel guilty leave, and the ones who don't feel guilty stay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I couldn't really make. There's something there, but I couldn't really put my finger on it. Why? Like, what are the dimensions of that? So if you feel guilt for participating, or at least not doing anything against being complicit in this evil, if you find some kind of justification for it, then you can be happy. But if you feel guilty, you have to leave, right? That's kind of...
Yeah.
Or no, you have to leave as in you are forced to leave, but you feel compelled to leave.
I think I kind of read it more that it wasn't necessarily like a... it wasn't necessarily given that guilt would automatically lead to you leaving. Maybe I just didn't...
It didn't say that, but it did say that no one is guilty in Omelas. That's the thing. But then it also says like the ones who can't deal with it, they're the ones who leave.
Yeah. And I guess there's something to say about the discrepancy between children and adults in this book as well. Like, children are allowed to feel this sense of guilt when they first experience it, and then they're expected to get over it. Whereas those people who can't erase that sense of guilt or end up, reflecting on it and like feeling guilt, leave. There is something about this. I've not quite figured it out, but like there is like this discrepancy between children and adults. It's quite clear at the beginning of this story as well. The description between like adults and then children, it's like, well, I mean, obviously it's a clear distinction, but like there's like a lot of emphasis on children, I think, in this.
Well, as soon as they find out the dark secret, they're no longer innocent, and because children are innocent, they are not adults. That's one thing.
Yeah.
And also, we have this idea of sacrifice, right? You have to sacrifice something to get something else.
True.
And I think, children are kind of, to sacrifice children is like the ultimate sacrifice. It's like this innocent, naive being that's the future generation, the future of the country. You sacrifice that. That's like, deep. And, there's like ancient cultures who sacrifice children because it was like it's Isaac, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, your point as well about adulthood being the need to make sacrifices or the need to make decisions that are impossible. So it's quite rich there.
Well, it opens also a dialogue to idealism versus realpolitik. Like, do we have these kind of, if we go to the slavery debate, like imagine you're born in like a slavery existing country and you're in the upper class.
Yeah.
Like, realistically, like, what can you do? In that scenario, like, ideally you should leave Omelas.
Yeah.
And go into the darkness, but that doesn't actually help the slaves at all.
Yeah.
Like, the child is still in the basement. But then, realpolitik would tell us, yeah, well, some things are evil, but we have to, depending on the circumstance, case by case, we can't actually follow ideals. We have to make certain trade-offs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think. I mean, one of the as you said, like leaving Omelas.
Like, you're really saving yourself from your own guilt. You're not helping the child. Right?
Yes. Yeah, it's strange. I don't really get it. Like, is leaving Omelas good or is it bad?
Right. It's like,
because there is all this like potential to actually do something, and like, let's say, if you're going to leave Omelas, why not destroy it? Like, what's the difference for you leaving it, right? And also, is leaving like a satisfactory, like, overcoming of guilt? Because it's still there, and that, I don't know, we assume that you could do something about it. So maybe you could feel maybe not more guilt, but a different kind of guilt. Maybe just as strong for just leaving the place. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, if we want to go with your iPhone example, it would be like, the supply chains of these iPhones is so terrible, I'm going to live in a shack and catch rainworms.
Yeah.
Okay, but you didn't, like, there was still the supply chain.
yeah, exactly. And, yeah, which is, like, one thing that I, it's difficult, like, to enact any kind of meaningful change.
And Zizek would be all over this, right?
Oh, massively, yeah. This is up Zizek.
Zizek, he doesn't want to put sand on the balls, he wants to cut off the balls, right?
Yeah.
To revisit that story.
And it connects to the Woman in the Dunes as well, Sunano, on that. Like, in a way, it's, what I think was quite compelling about that book was this idea of feeling like you're doing something when you're actually not doing anything at all. Obviously here we're not, well, actually, I don't know. I mean, leaving Omelas it's not shown as like this is a morally good action. It's not shown as like an action which gives you any moral credit or anything like that.
Right.
It's more just like I can't deal with the guilt, or I kind of want some like kind of enlightenment or something, or to go somewhere which is another utopia. It's a little bit vague, but in Sin and Honor, it's the equivalent would be like, I've seen the key and I've got a drawing of the key now, and I'm gonna try and make a replica key so I can open the door. When actually you never get that far.
Well, it's also the duplicity of the woman. It's herself, because she's in that hole, and at first she's really antagonized, as in like she's complicit in this evil society. But really, what can she do? Like, she can't do anything.
Yeah. So there is a question of in Omelas, like, what power do people actually do to change things? Because they are capable of, you said they're not simple. They're not just pure hedonists. They do understand pain. They do understand evil. They do understand the weight of this. But somehow they manage to live with it. But given all this, what is preventing the destruction of this place? Could you imagine like a world which is so perfect, not just in a hedonistic way, but in like this perfect society where you are like the most authentic human being, or like this most, I don't know, perfect situation. And if you had that, would you be so like seduced by that, or so like engrossed by that you would not like want to throw that away?
I would.
It's a kind of an impossible question, I think.
Yeah, I would take it apart by saying that to really achieve a very like almost perfect, meaningful life, that can never come from being in a certain society. That can never be an outside group influence. It always has to come from within. Each individual for themselves has to kind of find a like meaningful thing or way to spend their lives, and have their own system of values and find meaning in what they do and be happy from that. Like, you can't just take any person and put them in a society which is by some set of undefined rules perfect, and then this person will also live meaningful and happy. I reject that notion. Okay. I think it always has to come from the individual, not from the society.
I guess as well, like this idea of like these children are born into this world, and they don't have a choice over where they live. They, or at least they don't have a choice over the fact that they're born in Omelas.
Well, now we're really digging into anarchism and dismantling the social contract, right?
Yeah. So I want to also talk about what is this exit and where are they going. I'll read the last passage because it's quite nice.
That one's nice as well.
At times, one of the adolescent girls or boys who go to see the child does not go home to weep or rage, does not in fact go home at all. Sometimes also a man or a woman much older falls silent for a day or two, then leaves home. These people go out into the street and walk down the street alone. They keep walking and walk straight out the city of Omelas through the beautiful gates. They keep walking across the farmlands of Omelas. Each one goes alone, youth or girl, man or woman. Night falls. The traveller must pass down the village streets, between the houses with the yellow-lit windows, and on out into the darkness of the fields. Each alone, they go west or north towards the mountains. They go on. They leave Omelas. They walk ahead into the darkness, and they do not come back. The place they go towards is a place even less imaginable to most of us than a city of happiness. I cannot describe it at all. It is possible that it does not exist, but they seem to know where they're going, the ones who walk away from Omelas. Boom!
Boom! Okay, first thing that I noticed is adolescence. So apparently this writer person was super influenced by Carl Jung, and Jung has this thing called the messianic stage, the messianic phase, something like that, which is like a literal like stage in brain development from like, don't quote me on this, 17 to 21, where a person undergoes like a neurochemical but also spiritual transformation of, you know, finding, like, trying to find some meaning in a messianic sense, in like a self-sacrificing way.
And when you quote Jung, you're not talking about like, you said like a like talking about brain chemistry, but Jung didn't study this, right?
But people have latched onto that later, and like he talks about a spiritual transformation, but it's also like framed in this like very specific people from this age to this age, like as there's like a biological, physical component to this. Right? It's something happens with the body. Jung didn't like fucking study the exact neurochemistry of the brain or anything like that, but it's like a thing tied to the age of the person.
Yes, right?
It's not you're not gonna have this in your 40s, basically.
Yes, sure.
So yeah, I think that's reflected here for sure, and like the modern day equivalent would be like political activism or something like that, right?
Yeah, it's going on your gap year, going for like, I mean, me, like when I went to Canada, that was kind of the same thing. I was like 20 when I did that. I think
save the whales.
Anyway, so carry on. What is this messianic?
Well, this is like when I read adolescence, I was like, yeah, this would have to be adolescence, right? So that makes sense why it's, when the children see the oppressed child, they cry, and then some of them, when they become adolescents, then they can't deal with this anymore. Some of them have to leave, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so again, and they're not really helping a child. It's like a thing for yourself, or for some greater cosmic justice that is not defined.
Yeah.
So where are they going? Into the darkness?
I don't know.
Uncertainty, chaos,
parallelism. I think it is like I said before, it's significant that they're all ones, right? It's not the people who walk away from Omelas. It's not the number of people who have walked away. It's the ones, the individuals who've walked away.
And that also ties into this messianic thing. Like it has to be like an individual thing about you. It's not about only being part of something.
Right? Exactly. Only you can do this kind of thing. And I what was I gonna say? I forgot.
Well, they're also making a really ballsy trade here, right? You're trading this perfect society with this one little caveat for complete uncertainty. Like, you'd have to be insane. Kind of.
Maybe, yeah.
Like, maybe, like, who knows? Maybe where you're going is, like, way worse, which probably is.
Yeah. And, I mean, it's not like the leaving... I think, leaving is not with the promise or the expectation of finding a better place, although it is an unimaginable place, a place that's even less imaginable than the city of happiness. But I think, when I was reading this, like I got very, very strong connection with like Nietzsche, and just like this idea of like individualism generally, and like individual experience, or like and like existentialism and stuff, like being I don't know, having this like revelatory moment in the mountains when you're trying to like figure things out. I don't know, but I mean, if you were troubled by this, I don't think you could. There's nothing you could do in this city that where you could escape from that sense of guilt, right? It's like that John Carpenter movie. Zizek talks about it as well. What's it called?
It's not the ideology one, is
it? It's the ideology one, yeah.
With the glasses?
Yeah, it's the revelation in that movie.
Once
they
you
live.
can't unsee it.
Yeah, so a guy he's living in this consumerist modern day, and he finds these pair of sunglasses that show him the advert is suddenly it's like advertisement, and he can't stop seeing it anymore. Um, in Zizek's in that documentary, he talks a lot about the scene where he tries to get his friend to like wear the glasses, and they get into like this huge fight. It's like super super violent fight. They almost kill each other because the guy doesn't want to put on the glasses. He doesn't want to see it.
So this would be
So I wonder if you could have that in Omelas as well.
yeah the people. Well, it's different though because in the Omelas people know
They do, yeah.
they know they can see the ideology, but they still.
But maybe they do, but they also justify it, right? Maybe there's also this culture, this explanation that the child would be.
So yeah, I guess the real question is, do they justify the guilt away, or do they just live with the guilt?
Yeah, I mean, so it's not explicitly said that the ones that feel guilt leave, right? It's more just that, like,
it is said that the people in Omelas do not feel guilt.
Oh, it does? What is it?
That's like a big look up.
Is it towards the
Control
end?
F guilt. It's not actually. Weird page break.
It's so annoying. It puts the page break on fucking. Okay, upon the gongs, blah 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 blah. One thing I know there is none of. One thing I know there is none of in Omelas is guilt. No one feels guilty.
That's like it's kind of at the beginning as well, right? That's like a definitional thing of like Omelas. Right, we don't know about the child at this point.
Right. Okay. And it also there's another use of guilt. To exchange all the goodness and grace of every life in Omelas for that single small improvement, that is to free the child, to throw away the happiness of thousands for the chance of happiness of one, that would be to let guilt within the walls indeed. I like this description, letting guilt within the walls. Like, I mean, people, it's like people have become so good at repressing the guilt within this like structure of a city, this like citadel on the mountain or whatever, which physically doesn't let guilt in. Like, so what is in the minds of these people? Like, how is that possible? How can you like, get to this point where you don't feel guilt?
Well, if we want to take historical examples, a really easy thing would be like racial or religious ideology, where you say the lower races are by definition the lower races, so therefore they deserve like their place in the world because that's how it is.
Sure.
That's kind of how racist ideology has worked in the past. Now, obviously, slavery is not inherently a race-based institution; it's more like class-based. So you would say like. Like, in more ancient societies, it was, people of the same race enslaving people of their own race.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of race-based, like, slavery throughout history as well, though, right?
Very little, comparatively. It was mostly a class thing. But, yeah, so how do you justify... Yeah, it's some kind of religious thing, right? Like, you're born poor, or you're born this race, or you're born XYZ, and by virtue of that, it's like a God-given order. The order of nature is so that you ought to be in a lower place than me. That's the rationale, right? Of justifying it.
Yeah, the difference here would be that the child is still recognized as a child and not something necessarily subhuman, right? It's recognized as something that could have freedom.
And it's also like, it says like it's imbecilic, but it's not clear whether it was born defective or it became that way.
Yeah, but also, I mean, you if you were taking this this perspective, or as you say, like of this certain class or this certain race as subhuman, then it would follow that this person, I mean, it wouldn't even be a person at that point. Maybe it would be something that couldn't even experience freedom. Maybe,
right?
Something that's like so unhuman that it doesn't even understand what freedom could be.
Well, we'll get kind of getting there, right? It's because even if the child was free, it couldn't appreciate.
Maybe, yeah.
So yeah, like yes, it is still a child, but yeah. Also, what happens when this child grows up? Do you have to put a different child in there?
Well, see, I was confused as well because this child's 10 years old, right?
Right.
So
Is it
Omelas only 10
forever?
years old. Who knows?
Do you have like a stock of child?
I thought it was going to be the case that one of the children got swapped or something at some point.
It's not a good place to be a child.
No.
Hmm.
Yeah, when it stops becoming a child, will it get swapped, or will it ever not be will it ever stop being a child? If that makes sense.
Well, ask yourself.
This is so unfunny. It's not even bottom of the barrel. There's no barrel.
It's funny.
This is basement of Omelas level humor.
You would know.
Rusty mop bucket level humor.
Yeah, we all know why the mops are sticky.
Oh my god.
Fumbling with its genitals.
No!
And on that note, happy 4th of July, everyone. Is there anything you want to add?
I guess, have you drawn anything from this? Like, have you got anything?
A horrid picture in my mind. Well, okay, I would say the story is significantly more inventive and thought-provoking in its narrative than, for example, The King in Yellow.
Yes.
Even though it's very short, there's definitely something here. It's not just, oh, but what if there's no?
And you didn't know it?
What if there's?
You crazy?
Imagine there's no borders.
What?
John Lennon.
Oh, right.
I like John Lennon.
Sure.
I just thought Imagine song.
Yeah.
People riff on it.
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah. I get it now.
Yeah. What is the takeaway? I mean, this is kind of very like lame, hunkering down in my already established ideological position, but I guess like that.
No.
Utilitarianism is not good.
Yeah.
I just do not believe in it. I never really have. I'm always more of a natural rights guy than utilitarianism. But then again, this story doesn't give us that option, because it's like, if the child is, there's no scenario where we free this child, right? So,
For me, what could I say? I don't know.
Happy to be out of the basement.
I shouldn't have laughed at that one. Should have suppressed my laughter. I guess, what can I say? I enjoyed it. I thought it was like, it is an interesting idea. And I think it's interesting because it is not so directly trackable onto like typical conversations people have about like politics, political philosophy, and I think I always find it like, and I'm guilty of this as well. But it really annoys me whenever I'm like reading something and I'm looking for signals for what it is. I'm looking for signals of like, is this libertarian? Is this fucking Marxism? Is this conservatism? Is this liberalism? Like, it's a good, it's a useful, but it's also kind of frustrating. It is clearly written from like a left-wing perspective, or at least
there are some giveaways, but
inspired.
It does a really good job of being apolitical and transcending political ideology, I would say.
Yeah, because I think the reason why is that neither of the solutions are good, and it's not like walking away from Omelas is a good thing. It's not like individualism is the way forward, or this self-searching thing is the way forward, or abandoning is the way forward. Which would make for a much more satisfying ending, although it would not have been like satisfying in terms of like as a piece of literature. But it would have definitely taken away from the nuance of this. So I really like the nuance.
I guess my criticism.
I like the nuance.
My criticism would be, and again, this is like King in Yellow and what is it? Picnic in the Forest. So what is that?
Which one's that?
The Soviet one, something picnic.
Oh,
Roadside Picnic. We always have this, and like the more it really surfaces in stories, the more frustrating it becomes to me. Is that there's always one or two of these magical storytelling potatoes that we just have to swallow, and it's like, well, it's like the author is saying like, okay, so here's this thing that doesn't really make sense, and there's really no way that it could exist in the real world, but we're going to entertain it for the sake of the story. And I was like, okay, cool, you can still make a great valid point in the story, but I'm kind of getting tired of having to swallow all these magical storytelling devices. I want something real, which is maybe too much to ask.
Yeah, I think so.
I hate being told these what if scenarios of dude, what if I could just produce infinite amount of potatoes? No, but you it's not physical. You cannot produce infinite potatoes, dude. And he's like, no, but what if? Think about it, man.
I guess I see your point. Yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm much more tolerable of that. I don't know. I enjoy that, right?
Yeah, there is pleasure in it, and it does allow us to explore ideas that we couldn't explore otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, but that is the bottom line, right? Because if this were any more explainable, the system of this child's oppression or why how these things work, then we wouldn't have a philosophical discussion.
Right, it's interesting to think about, but at the end it always kind of comes down to, well, but so what? Because it's not applicable.
I don't know.
Well, we can have a discussion of utilitarianism versus idealism or natural rights or whatever.
Yeah.
But no actual real world problem will ever be solved or approximated by entertaining what if scenarios.
It might not give us a direct answer to anything, but I think it,
which is fine.
Yeah,
but it's annoying as well.
I think what it does is it helps us to feel around these problems and learn about them. Or not these problems, but these what is utilitarianism? What is it? What is possible with utilitarianism? Or what is conceivable with utilitarianism? How can we highlight the extremes of it, even kind of impossible extremes?
Oh, and by the way, when I looked up the Wikipedia for the story, it had super long reference section of oh yeah, this was mentioned in Star Trek, and the Korean Cape fucking band BTS, they made us.
Oh yeah, they did, right?
And I was like, okay, it's like the King in Yellow in a sense that there is this unexplainable thing that's just unexplainable, and therefore it's interesting. And so now we're gonna have all these references, but it's no one really actually can point at exactly what it is about this story that makes it so. There's no consensus of this is the great thing about this story, right? It's just kind of oh, what if all these things happened?
Yeah, cool.
So yeah, I am intellectually stimulated and annoyed at the same time.
It's good. That's a good place to be.
And with
is that any different to your normal state?
Constantly irritated.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna go be happy, and Nick is gonna go sit in his own excrements.
I've seen your apartment, bro. You can't talk to me.
Hey,
and you're on the first floor as well.
I don't have that much furniture.
No.
That's not relevant. Okay, see you
Yeah,
guys.
in fact, that kind of works in my favor. Although I don't think you have a mop, but that's
I don't have a mop.
yeah,
I have a toilet cleaning brush.
you do.
I do.
Brilliant.
All right, guys. Next time, Road to Serfdom,
Yes.
which is very, very real. No what ifs in this one.
Okay. Cool.
Boy.
Book.
Boys, 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 boys.